To understand the Vervane, we first need to understand the Barzam. The RMS 154 Barzam was developed by the Titans as a mass-production mobile suit during the later stages of the Gryps Conflict. Its design focused on simplicity, reliability, and efficient mass production, making it very different from the highly specialized mobile suits developed earlier in the conflict. But the Barzam was more than just a mass production machine. Its basic design provided a flexible platform that could be further modified for different combat requirements. As the Titans continued developing new technologies, the Barzam concept evolved toward higher mobility, greater performance, and more specialized equipment. One of these developments was the Barzam high mobility type, known as Vervane. Rather than simply adding new equipment to the original Barzam, Vervane represents a further evolution of the basic design, pushing its mobility, proportions, equipment, and overall performance much further. And that was exactly why I wanted to rebuild it. First, we'll start by modifying the legs. As you can see, this is roughly what the 3D printed parts look like. Of course, the results can vary depending on the type of 3D printer used, but this is only a sample. So, let's start the build from this sample. From the very beginning, this sample was not designed to retain the original folding joint between the upper and lower legs. However, the design itself already leaves enough room for further modification. Now, let's take all the parts apart and analyze them one by one. You can see the telescopic connecting arm mechanism that is commonly used throughout the TR series. This mechanism is actually included in the original design, because the original configuration connects the TR6 thigh section to the lower leg section of the Hazenflay 2. Then you can see that we can use the original connecting components between the TR6 thigh and lower leg sections and directly modify and fit them into this area. Next, I'll gradually work through each part and recreate the functional components so that the 3D printed parts will have fully articulated and movable joints. Let's take a look at this part. You can see how I'm transferring the joint components onto this kit. First, I use a hobby knife to score a straight line along the area that needs to be cut. This separates the cutting area into two sections, making it easier to remove precisely. For this, I'm using the Mad Craftsman steel saw, 0.2 millimeters. It cuts quickly and consistently, giving you a clean and precise cross-section while saving a lot of time during the finishing and modification process. I highly recommend it. Cutting 3D printed ABS parts is actually not difficult at all. It's very similar to cutting regular plastic. However, you should be aware that 3D printed material can produce fine powder when being cut, so make sure to wear a mask and take appropriate safety precautions. The TR6 leg joint connector can fit directly into this position, but after cutting it off, there are still a few areas that need some minor adjustment. Here, you can see the internal dimensions of the leg joint connector. These dimensions were already taken into consideration during the design process, so the leg joint can fit directly into this section. Then, simply sand the cut surface until it is reasonably flat. It doesn't need to be perfectly smooth, because we'll be using UV curing resin later to secure the parts together instead of relying on glue. As for this protruding section of the lower leg connector, we need to cut it down and adjust its length. Once the length is correct, it can be inserted directly into the mounting point on the lower leg. After trimming the part, lightly sand the surface to make it slightly rough. This will give the glue or UV curing resin a better surface to grip, making the connection much stronger. Then, try assembling the parts together. If the fit is too tight, you can simply sand the connection point slightly to make installation easier. As you can see here, once installed, the upper and lower legs can achieve an angle of roughly 45 degrees. You can also see that the joint does not interfere with the front section of the lower leg. Now, let's put everything together and take a look at the overall appearance. And this is roughly what it looks like. Of course, this type of joint could also be designed directly into the part from the beginning. But one of the biggest joys of model building is modification. We also have to consider the balance of the Barzam after installing these legs. With the large weapons and equipment mounted on the back, the weight distribution can become seriously unbalanced, which means there's a high chance of the lower legs tipping backward. Some people may choose to modify it, while others may not. But personally, I definitely want to modify it because that's where the fun is. Next comes the surface refinement. I'll slowly explain, step by step, how I deal with the various issues you can encounter with 3D printed parts. For this, we'll be using UV curing repair putty. So, if you want to follow along and build this together with me, now is the time to get your materials ready. First, carefully inspect all of the 3D printed parts. One of the common issues with 3D printed parts is the surface. You may find small holes or imperfections in certain areas. Most of these holes are caused by the support structures required during the printing process. When those supports are removed, they can sometimes leave small cavities or marks behind. Of course, these problems can also be reduced by adjusting the printing angle and the size and placement of the supports, but I won't go into all of those details in this video. For now, what we want to focus on is simply how to make the entire surface smooth and clean. When using UV curing putty, the curing time is much faster and more efficient compared to conventional putty. And from here, we move on to the most time-consuming part of the entire process: sanding. The tools I use for sanding are generally quite standard, but I almost always prefer to sand with water. There are two main reasons for this. First, it helps create a much smoother surface. Second, it prevents the sanding dust from becoming airborne. When sanding with water and a sanding sponge, I usually start directly with 600 grit. But the most important thing is to make sure the surface is properly cleaned and then carefully inspect the entire part. As I explained earlier, 3D printed parts can sometimes have small holes or imperfections. The tricky thing is that some of these holes may not become visible until after you start sanding. That's why, after sanding, I usually repeat the same cleaning and inspection process 2 or 3 times. This is why inspection is so important. In fact, the most difficult and time-consuming part of producing this kit is the sanding process. Most 3D printed parts are designed to fit the overall kit very precisely. A huge amount of our production time is spent removing the visible printing lines, filling small imperfections, and dealing with tiny holes that might otherwise go unnoticed. And because many of these areas are located on the visible front surfaces of the parts, they have to be treated with even more care. The smoother and cleaner the surface is, the higher the quality of the finished product will feel. Once a part has been sanded to the point where I can feel that the entire surface is smooth, and even with my fingertips, I wash all the parts thoroughly. I use water and dish soap to completely clean the surface and remove any remaining dust or residue. After that, I spray on a layer of 1500 grit surfacer. And then I go through every single part again, carefully inspecting the surface one by one. You can see it here. Once, twice, 3 times. I basically repeat the inspection and sanding process around 3 times for each part. Only when I can no longer see any obvious problems with the naked eye do I move on to the deep cleaning stage. But even after cleaning, when we inspect the parts again, we can still find quite a few different imperfections. So we have to go back and sand these areas again. Now, let's take a look at the basic condition of the parts. As you can see, some of the original kit parts are already good enough to go directly into the painting stage. But some of the 3D printed parts still need a little more surface preparation. So, making the 3D parts themselves isn't actually the most difficult part. The biggest challenge is how much time and patience you're willing to spend refining each individual part. We're repeating all of the steps I explained earlier on these 3 parts. This is actually a good example to demonstrate the process. For rounded parts like these, I usually prefer to use a sanding sponge. However, if you sand too aggressively and the panel lines become less defined, you'll need to recreate those original lines using a sculpting knife. For these straight-edged parts, I first make sure the surfaces are completely flat and perpendicular before moving on to shaping the C faces. This way, the basic geometry stays accurate, and I can keep the edges and details nice and sharp. Now we're basically ready to move on to the colors. For this build, I'm using colors developed entirely by HIVELAB. I didn't use Pantone references to formulate them, but compared with the official color codes that have been released, they are more than 90% matched. The first color I'm using is Mecha White. It's not a pure white. It has a slightly grayish blue tone, which gives the armor a much more solid and mechanical appearance. The second main color is a deep orange, with a slightly stronger reddish tone. And the third one is my favorite, the Black Hairs, Gray Black. I'm using this gray black directly across the main body of the Black Hairs unit. And of course, we can't forget the purple gray used for the internal frame. This is also one of those iconic colors that I think is essential to the overall AOZ aesthetic. For the decals, I'm also going to use around 7 different types of water slide decals and combine them to create the final appearance of this Vervane. As for exactly which decals I'm using, I won't be providing that information here. Are one of the most basic ways for a model builder to develop their own personal style. The decals I choose may not necessarily match your taste, and that's completely fine, because ultimately, this is my interpretation of the design. And now, we're finally moving on to the last part of the process, carefully putting everything together. For the eye area, I used a sticker, but I added a layer of UV curing resin over it and cured it with UV light. This creates a glass-like, semi-domed effect over the eye, giving it a little more depth and making it look more like an actual optical sensor. And with that, the head is basically complete. Next, we can move on to assembling the lower leg and thigh sections. First, we need a runner. From the runner, I cut 4 4mm diameter cylindrical pieces to use as the internal pins. They go together like this, and then we simply cut away the excess material. For all of the external armor pieces, you can use glue to permanently secure them in place. Of course, this is only recommended if you don't plan on removing the armor again later. For this lower leg connection joint, you can use glue to permanently secure the connection point. However, be careful not to glue the actual joint itself. Only glue the connecting section, so that the joint can still move freely. Next, we'll repeat the same process for the right leg. First, cut away the supporting pins. Then install the rear leg skirt armor, followed by the lower leg itself. After that, install the remaining accessories, and the right leg is complete. For the rear skirt armor around the waist, there is a 2mm metal pin running through the center. Make sure to install the center pin first, and only then attach the left and right tail fins. As for the shield, it's very straightforward. It's simply made from two main parts that fit together, so just align the two pieces and assemble them. For the metallic silver parts, I don't apply any protective top coat over them. Instead, I first apply the protective coat to the gray parts, mask them off, and then spray the silver afterward. For the fuel rods on the backpack, there is a small recessed section here. Simply align the trapezoidal shape on the fuel rod with that recess, and it will slot into place. There are also some very small screw-like details on the chest. I painted them in two different colors, silver and gray, to create a stronger contrast between the details. For the thrusters between the two side boosters on the thighs, the individual components are painted separately. The front intake is gray, while the rear exhaust section is orange. I've also added two additional pots around this area of the thigh. This allows the exhaust section to be painted separately in orange, which helps bring out more detail in the finished assembly. And now, we can finally put everything together. And this is the result. It took me roughly 4 days to complete this Vervane. During the process, I also wasn't feeling well and had to spend a day in the hospital for observation, so making this video wasn't exactly easy. For this video, I've also added a full voiceover to make it easier for you to understand my process, the techniques I'm using, and the direction I take when building these models. I hope that in future videos I can introduce even more different segments and elements and make the videos more enjoyable and entertaining for everyone. So please continue to support me. And if you enjoyed this style of build video and you like this Vervane, please share the video with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe. There will also be another Vervane video released exclusively on the members only channel. If you're interested, you can join the membership channel. There may even be a chance for members to receive parts for this Vervane themselves. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for all your support. And that's basically it. Vervane is finally complete. But for me, this is only the beginning. There are still many Titans machines waiting to be built.